another episode of the C-Suite Edge. I'm your host, John Light, president and founder of Sabretooth Recruiting. And today, I actually have a really interesting guest, and his name is Kevin Hart, but I don't want to confuse you. Even though he's really funny, has a great sense of humor, it's not that Kevin Hart. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today.
John, thank you. It's a real pleasure. Excited to be here.
No, absolutely. You're with a company called, and helped start a company called Green Check Verified. And when I saw the name, I'm like, what on earth do they do? Right? Had no clue. But I'd really appreciate it, just by way of introduction, if you took about 90 seconds, tell us a little bit about you and tell us about your relationship and where you're taking Green Check Verified and what you guys do and all that fun stuff.
Well, thank you. We realized after we created the name that from a domain perspective, people aren't going to like typing our email out, but that becomes less of a problem. So, the premise behind the company is how do you take high-risk industries and make them available to financial and business services? And in particular, when we were looking at solving this problem from a market perspective, we really focused on cannabis early because it was the most obvious market. And I'm going back to 2015, 2016. And so how do you take highly regulated industries that would love to work together, but they're never going to be able to figure out how because it's a data problem? And if you think about banks and credit unions and their tried and true level of regulations and what they actually require, and then the burgeoning cannabis industry, which is federally illegal, but in 39 states with a whole variety of licenses, this is a gigantic data and compliance puzzle. And so that was the approach that we took. And one thing that we did that was very different and special is when you know the demand is there, okay, you have to create the supply. And so we focus exclusively on how do you get the banks and credit unions to say yes to this $100 billion industry. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's an interesting point that you just kind of slipped in there. How do you solve this conundrum for a $100 billion industry? It's not like we're out here collecting bottle caps, and it's not like the industry's in one or two states. This is something in terms of scope of revenue, dollars involved, moving around, just as a business problem. Set the contents of the industry aside, I guess you could say. From a business problem perspective, man, this is pretty complex.
Well, the one lesson that we learned early on is, why, can, and how. And, you have to give somebody a reason to look at something. Why are they interested? Why are they going to do this? And then can they do it? And then last, the easy part where we come in actually is how. But we had to spend a ton of time, not only designing how the system was going to work, but educating, because I can't tell you how many times I call it the Heisman. We would approach a bank or a credit union and say, we would like to talk to you about cannabis banking. We never even got the second word out because of, the perceptions, the fear, the reputational risk, it's federally illegal, et cetera. So we had to spend a lot of time on educating. And, with education that, and the why, that sheer size of market, you had to provide context for that, but then that they can do this. Cannabis is federally illegal to sell. It's not federally illegal to bank. In fact, FinCEN has offered guidance on this. No kidding. And so you can bank cannabis. You just have to follow the rules. Now, how are you going to do that? And you can't do this on spreadsheets. Sorry, Bill Gates. Spreadsheets are not technology, okay? You can't do this with sticky and Post-it notes because you have to be able to understand the source and uses of these dollars from these wide variety of very different licensed cannabis businesses. And so, again, it's this gigantic data puzzle. Ingest the information, know the rules and regulations as to what was supposed to happen in that state for that license type, for that product, for that person on that date, cannabis sales, and then that creates the flow of funds into the U.S. banking system.
Okay. In an uncomplicated way.
We made it uncomplicated, but it is complicated as heck.
Yeah, but I was going to ask in an uncomplicated way. how would you describe, and you already have in a sense, but let's get it down to something kind of compact and focused here, but what's the biggest problem you solve and who do you solve it for best?
The problem solving is equal because, and again, we focus on the supply side. How does a financial institution know that they're dealing with a licensed, compliant, properly operated business, cannabis business? And
Right.
again, that's more than just saying the state gave me a license. So you have to look at the products that they're selling, who they're selling them to, the frequency at which they're being sold, the method of which they're being paid for, et cetera. And you have to do that at the single dollar level because you can't allow the money to go into the financial institution and then have an examiner discover a problem. Examiners don't like that. Banks don't like that. So we have to sit between all of these nodes of data and apply the rules and regulations to it. So we're creating a new market opportunity for financial institutions who want deposits, want to expand their business,
Right.
need growth now more than ever. And then on the other side, you have the cannabis industry that when we first entered this space, et cetera, I mean, they couldn't find a bank account, and the ones that they got were just so onerously priced that it didn't even make sense. And so, again, how do you connect them? And we do that all through data and scale. And so we have over 14,000 cannabis businesses on the platform today. 176, count went up one from yesterday, 176 different financial institutions. And we're processing over $1 billion a month in cannabis sales into those FIs.
Wow. And that $1 billion a month, you're talking 10, 11% of the entire industry, right?
Just
Over the
two,
course of a year.
well, there's two ways to look at that,
Yeah.
okay? And so that's a great question, okay? So cannabis sales, if you look at it and you look at all the reports, they're going to say it's 35 to 40 billion.
Mm-hmm.
I call it 100 billion, not because I'm bad with math, but each state, right, interstate commerce is not allowed in the
Right.
cannabis industry. The
Right.
product can't cross state lines. And so when you have vertically integrated or intrastate, one of the things that we designed is if a financial institution is going to make the effort to service this industry, how do you bank the same dollar 5+ times? So the product sold in the dispensary, which came from a manufacturer, which
Mm-hmm.
came from an extractor, which came from a cultivator, which came from a grower, all with different license requirements, all with different compliance requirements. Our financial institutions can bank that same dollar because as the product moves, as the plant moves, the money moves with it. And so they get to take those additional deposit dollars. So we amplify the cannabis industry for financial institutions and service the individual cannabis customers.
No kidding. Okay. That's smart. I mean, at the end of the day, too, it's an incredible opportunity because, like you said, it's in 39 states. It's not like it's going to vaporize and go away tomorrow.
Right. No, it will
You know,
not. It will
but
not.
but the compliance piece is probably your biggest exposure because the last thing a bank wants to find is that one of those dollars is involved in some sort of laundering scheme or something of that nature. Accounting for it. I'm curious to find out how long did it take you and your team to put together the technology platform that could manage that level complexity and diversity of compliance across 39 different jurisdictions.
Well, it's 39 plus because you have city and county
Oh
levels
yeah,
in
yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
places. And then you have adult and medical licenses. So, great question. As part of my 40 plus years in enterprise software, I spent 10 years working for different VC and private equity funds,
Mm-hmm.
working on their portfolio companies. I've taken companies public, sold them to publicly traded companies. So I've learned a lot of valuable lessons individually and through that cycle. And so one of the things that we did here at GreenCheck, first off, is we hired a team to design the platform. We spent a lot of time talking to all the regulators on both sides of how
Mm-hmm.
this would work. We even hired a gentleman who wrote the state of Connecticut's program which was one of the earliest ones and well defined. He came in, so we understood the cannabis industry. But we spent 2 years designing the company. We didn't write any code, really. We played around. We did some little, little design stuff and some pseudo MVP stuff. But we really did not write the code for the core platform because to be successful, you got to build your company first and then write the code. People rush to write code and they don't understand their market, they don't understand product fit, they don't understand scalability, et cetera. So, again, we applied a lot of lessons learned, and we like to think we did it the right way.
No, well, I mean, it sounds that way. It takes a lot of domain knowledge, I think, nowadays to solve a problem. You know, there aren't, 100 years ago, 200 years ago in America, a carpenter or a farmer, a farmer could be a carpenter could be a farmer. And they did a lot of things that overlapped. But in the modern business environment, that's really, really hard to kind of be that everything to everyone or jack of all trades or however you want to phrase it. But it's funny, the newer things get, the older they are. You remember the old adage that's credited to Abraham Lincoln, I think it was, that if you give him 4 hours to chop down a tree, he's going to spend 3 hours sharpening the axe.
Yep.
And as soon as you said, we spent 2 years designing this, you probably had flow charts out the wazoo or a Monday board or whatever with just vast amounts on there because you'd have to. You guys were actually sharpening the axe to make sure that you could get the tree down.
Rooms and rooms of colored stickies. It looked like it was an April Fool's joke gone bad, but when we first did it, it was our war room as to how we were going to do it. And it's very odd that you quote Lincoln because I used to use a different quote from him when we were designing this company along with the co-founders and the early employees. People will always remember how well you did a job, not how fast you got it done. Very similar to the chopping the tree down. Yeah. So we were very, very deliberate in what we do because we knew, and we believed that we had one shot to get this right. Because if we launched this program and it didn't work well, that's the kiss of death in the banking industry. If somebody got a consent order or, they had a problem. So, we were overly cautious and thorough in our approach.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are some industries where they not only want you to fail fast, but failure is embraced. But these industries that you have a high level of regulation, a high threat of someone like the FDIC showing up at your doorstep and replacing everybody and taking over your bank, your credit union, your shop or whatever, I could totally see if you're snake bit once, it's not going to happen a second time.
Right. You don't get a second shot.
Wow, man. So was that 2 years stressful?
You know what? There have been moments when it's been stressful. I will not lie. I bootstrapped the company early on, and then we did raise some capital. We have an exceptional lead investor, Mendon Venture Partners. Shameless plug, because their LPs are financial institutions, but they saw the vision and they saw the opportunity because of the size of the market. But there have been times where we had to do some unnatural things. Thank God I have a wonderful spouse and partner in life. But I remortgaged my house and took some money out of the 401k because I believed in it, not because I'm foolish, not because I was wed to the idea. I knew that this was going to work, and it's proven to do that. And the numbers speak for themselves now.
$1 billion flowing through the platform monthly. That's not chump change. 176.
No, that's not our revenue. That's not our revenue. We make
right.
No,
totally understand.
Yeah.
But the volume is there to continue to build.
Absolutely.
Founder to founder. Let's be honest. Everybody talks about exits and all this other stuff, but the ability to continue to build and to create and innovate and take something that you could view loosely as a child that you've given birth to in a sense, from the innovation in your mind and your active will and focus and investment, and now you're taking that and you're growing it into adolescence. You're growing it towards adulthood. You just keep building that bad boy. That's exciting. To me anyway.
Well, wait till you see what we do next. Wait till you hear the future.
Oh,
It's
we're going to be
it is
talking.
good. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Well, speaking of the future, man, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, Kevin, and wants to learn more about what you're doing with Green Check Verified, the impact you're having, what's the best way to find you and get in touch?
So, please go to the website, www.greencheckverified.com, and or my email address is, and again, that domain name, I'm sorry, folks, but you got to grind through this, khart, Khart, at greencheckverified.com. I answer all my emails.
Fantastic.
I
And
live with a zero email inbox mentality. I clear it before 9 p.m. every day.
absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I appreciate the commitment because sometimes my eyes
Yep.
glaze over. But for anyone in the audience listening, Kevin and I are also connected on LinkedIn. So if you're connected with me, it is a hop, skip, and a jump to get into his in-mail box or to message him or send him a connection invitation. So feel free. Kevin, thanks so much for joining me today on the C-Suite Edge.
John, thank you.